Hello, my name is Sandy Adomaitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. Hey, writers and friends, it's Sandy. I'm reaching out to you from Studio City, California, the jewel of the San Fernando Valley. It's President's Day, and yesterday I left the peaceful gates of Studio City and went on a road trip with my friends north to Solvang, California, the Danish capital of America. And wine, lots of wine. Boy, do we have a fantastic show for you today. My guest is Walter Wolff, the author of The Right Rehab, a guide to addiction and mental illness recovery when crisis hits your family, available on Amazon and wherever you buy books. This step-by-step guide outlines how to identify and access treatment options for all individuals and families, regardless of their resources. Writers, I wanted to share this book with you because being creative isn't easy. If you need help, options are available. This book is also an excellent resource if you're writing about addiction. Before we get started, we need to talk about Walter Wolff. Walter Wolff is a pen name, and the man behind it promised a loved one privacy. As you will soon learn, a phone call changed his life. Walter was a producer in Hollywood for over 30 years. Now he is an interventionist and treatment placement specialist. Warning, the subject matter we discussed here can be triggering. Let's start the show. Walter Wolff, thank you so much for joining us on the Writers Hangout.
You bet. This is such a pleasure, Sandy. I appreciate it very much.
Walter, we've known each other for a long time, but we haven't been in touch. Then a friend of ours, Darlene Chan.
Also my agent.
And your agent. She reintroduced us. And did you know that Frank De Palma, her husband, is a fan of the Writers Hangout?
Frank, it's awfully good to know that you're here. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So we got reconnected, and you have written an important book titled The Right Rehab. Can you share how you got to this point in your life?
15 years ago, I got a phone call at 3 a.m. that a loved one of mine was in crisis due to addiction. And my wife and I looked at each other, and of course, we had absolutely no idea that this was happening. We didn't see the breadcrumbs at all. More than that, we had absolutely no idea what to do.
How scary. Does your blood run cold? You must have felt numb.
Not only numb, but the worst things that you ever could possibly think of in terms of people who are addicted. They just come racing through your mind. Everything from overdose to living in the gutter to being in prison. And also, this is really screwed up, but also shame. You feel shame because you think about people who know you, other families, and what are they going to think? I mean, this is so screwed up to think this way, but it's true. It's because I think we've been conditioned this way. People are going to think, oh my God, what are they going to think of us? And it's just pure terror. It is terror.
I can't imagine.
You ready for this? 90 million people in our country today are suffering from either an addiction, a mental disorder, or both. 90 million. Now, that's just a number, right? But think of it this way. 90 million people. That's the population of all the states west of the Mississippi River, with the exception of Texas and Louisiana. Okay? And when I meet people and they ask me, hey, what do you do? And I'll tell them, well, I'm an interventionist and treatment placement specialist. You can see their eyes just like zero in. on my
Yes.
eyes. And they look around and they look at me, they get closer and they say, we need to talk.
Before you got this frightening phone call, you you didn't really know about this world.
And not at all. But fortunately, I was very, very lucky. And that was because I had a very, very dear friend with whom I grew up. He was an actor. His name was Christopher Lawford, Christopher Kennedy Lawford. He was a recovering heroin addict. And Chris, of course, was a very, very big presence in the LA recovery community. And I called him at 5:30 in the morning. Of course, he was asleep. And I woke him up and I said, dude, this is what's happening. He could tell I was frightened out of my mind. And I said, what the hell do we do? He said, stand by. I'm going to have Walt Quinn call you. Of course, I had no idea who Walt Quinn was. Now, it was a 5-year nightmare. Okay. It would be sobriety, relapse, until finally the individual, it always comes down to this. The individual decides, I've had enough. I'm going to pull my life together. And today, he's the most successful human being I know. So the reason I got here, where I am today, is from 15 years ago, I started getting phone calls from people. Hey, I heard about you and what do I do? So because of Chris, I was introduced to the top people in the treatment world, the most ethical. And then I started to learn, how do you place somebody in the right rehab, in the right facility? I've been very lucky in my life that I've always loved everything that I did. I loved being in the movie and TV business. I was extremely lucky. I mean, really lucky. But I've decided to go ahead and make the change and do this. And I wish I'd been doing this for most of my life.
Was there a moment where you went, I'm going to take this fork in the road?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't do it for this reason, but I do think that when somebody reaches a certain age, and if you've been lucky in your life, you really should devote, not, if not all your time, most of your time, to helping other people. I just do. And I'll give you an example. When I was in the movie business, not once did I ever get a phone call from somebody saying, I just saw your movie. It was the best movie I've ever seen. It saved my life. Now, I'm not the only individual doing what I'm doing. When you work with a family and that family and that individual really pulls it together, whether it's addiction and or mental illness, they always look at you and say, you saved our lives. I didn't save their lives. All I did was I opened a few doors. They saved their lives. But Sandy, realize I'm not the only one who gets this, right? So you say to yourself, you really are making an impact on people's lives. And I think there's something to be said for that.
What does an interventionist do?
An interventionist is one who can engineer for someone to go to rehab who is resistant to going to rehab. That television show, Intervention, and you see
Yes.
the whole family get together and relapse. That's one way of doing it. There are different kinds of interventions, but the one that I mostly use, it's about leverage. And that is, as an example, if you have some 20 something living at home, either has a job or doesn't have a job, but is dependent upon the family to, living at home and the money, food and the car, that family is enabling that individual to be using drugs, to be addicted
Mhm.
in this case, right? So what you have to do is you have to cut off the enablement. So that's easy because the leverage is really focused and concentrated on one point. The same thing is I get calls from defense attorneys all the time, and they have somebody who's been picked up for a DUI or something even more serious, even a felony. And they say, you got to get my client into rehab right away. Well, that's easy because it's like, hey, listen, dude, you either go to rehab right now. Now, we can't guarantee what the outcome is going to be if you go. However, the chances are it's going to soften the blow. And you'd be amazed, Sandy, how many people will change their minds like, okay, I'm ready, let's go. So those are really easy points of leverage. The most difficult ones are people who live on their own. They have their own income. They're not beholden to anybody. Those are the most difficult ones right there. And those are the ones where it takes time in order to get that person to realize, okay, I've got to go to rehab. That's when I work with the family and pull together as many resources as possible with the family. We have to be united, and we figure out a game plan based upon that family's dynamics. Now, it could take 6 minutes, 6 hours, 6 days, 6 weeks. It could take 6 months. The issue is that what you have to do is you have to keep working with that family and with the individual. And hopefully that individual is going to realize, okay, I got to go. Now, there are also third party interventions. That person gets arrested. That makes it really easy. Now you got a focused, concentrated point of leverage.
How many rehab centers are there in the United States? And are they all the same? Do they essentially provide the same service?
Okay, this is a very key question. And first of all, there are over 25,000 rehabs in the country. Now, when I say rehabs, I mean rehabs and treatment programs. That's outpatient as well. One thing that's really important about the treatment world is that there's no such thing as one size fits all. So you might hear somebody have a conversation like, well, why don't you send them to this place? I hear it's really great. Well, great at what? This is the one thing that separates addiction treatment, I think, from everything else. And that is this is the first thing you have to do is you have to find out the diagnosis of the individual. Now, if you're lucky, you will have an official diagnosis. Otherwise, I have to get one. And that's not terribly difficult to do, at least with an over the phone assessment. But what happens is once you find out the diagnosis, that's how you find out where's the best facility, the best type of program to send this individual.
Can we step back? When you say a diagnose, you mean is the person drinking, taking drugs, cutting? Is that what you mean? Is the diagnose?
All of the above. But there are four different diagnoses, Sandy. There are four of them. One is just mental illness, just mental disorder. Another one is just substance use disorder. But the next two are really the ones most people, and that is it primary mental disorder, secondary substance use disorder? In other words, it's a co occurring illness, but the primary is driving the second one. So, in other words, it could be primary mental health, secondary substance use disorder, which means that the mental disorder is driving the substance use. Or it could be primary substance use disorder, secondary mental disorder, which means the substance use is driving the mental disorder. Now, when I say mental disorder, they're always the most common ones like depression, anxiety, and a lot of times it's personality disorder. But let me tell you, there's one issue that is not given enough notoriety or enough publicity, and that is trauma. Trauma is most likely is the primary illness as the primary diagnosis for substance use. So once I have a diagnosis, that actually makes it much clearer as to what kind of program to where this person should go. And now we come down to what's called licensure. Facilities all over the country are licensed in the state in which they reside, in which they practice. And it comes down to this. They are either primary mental health, secondary substance use disorder, or they are their licensure is primary substance use disorder, secondary mental disorder, or it could be just substance use disorder or just mental health. But there are also facilities, if I'm not sure what the diagnosis is, there are also facilities around the country that have two primary licensures. So you're sort of covered in that way.
So if I called you and I said, my sister's really in trouble, I need your help, you'd be able to walk me through all what you just said to get a diagnose for my sister? Yes.
That's the whole idea.
Wow.
And
I think one of the wonderful things about your book is that you don't withhold information. If a person has to call and ask questions to a rehab, you have questions that you can ask. So many times you buy these books and they get you around in circle, 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 and go on my Facebook and become part of the community, and you don't get real answers. But in the right rehab, great title, by the way. I love the look of the book, light blue. You give answers.
Thank you very much for saying that. But there's a reason why it is the way it is, because that's me. When people say something to me and I don't quite understand it, I will say, excuse me, let's go through this again. And I will ask people to break it down in the very simplest of building blocks. For instance, I have a chapter in there. How do you get insurance? How do you get Medicaid? How do you get the ACA, Obamacare, and the steps you have to go through? Unless those steps are delineated, if you don't explain it, that means they have to go somewhere else to find out. Well, that sucks. I mean, that's pretty stupid. You should explain it.
Also, what I like about the book, sometimes something is so important in your life and you have to read a contract, or you come down with lupus and you're reading a book on lupus. It gets so dry. You can't even get through it. When it
Well,
means your life, even, you're just like, I'll try again tomorrow. That is not what's happening in this book. It is an enjoyable read. Also,
how do
I
you
did not know this about you. You are a badass.
how do you mean by that?
Oh my goodness. You have done things like gone into unsavory places if your client happens to be in an unsavory place. Can you tell the story of Caroline from your book?
I had to go pick up this 20 something to get her to detox and to get her to rehab. She was living on the eastern side of Oklahoma City, very rural. I go there, you walk in, and there are a lot of people in there who, like, let's put it this way, you would not invite them over for dinner. Okay. I found out where her room is. I mean, these people are looking at me like, who the hell are you? Because they think I'm a cop, right? I go into Caroline's room, and there are four guys in there, and they had just finished hitting up with heroin. And these guys are looking at me like, excuse me? I always carry pepper spray with me. I say in the book, my fingers tightened around the pepper spray. And it did. And I said, get dressed. Sean got me here. He told me to come here. He's a lawyer. And get ready because we got a place for you right now. And she did it because she knew that there was a felony charge against her. And when her lawyer says do it, she does it. So anyway, there were three detox units in Oklahoma City. None of them would take her because, well, she's not in withdrawal yet. But at the same time that day, I had to also take a client to Tennessee, to Nashville, which is a 10-hour drive to go to rehab. And the mother keeps calling me, where are you? Where are you? So I say, Carolyn, you ever been to Nashville? And she says, oh, great, road trip, let's go. And I'm like, okay. So, I wasn't quite as excited as she was. Anyway, I took her to Nashville, man. I had no idea what to do. I didn't know what to do with her. So this is Cumberland Heights. And I said to them, I said, listen, you got to help me here because she doesn't have any money and she doesn't have any insurance. They said, okay, we're going to give her a month. We'll give her a scholarship, which is like, whoa. I mean, that was $40,000 at that time. And I said to Carolyn before I left, I said, listen, you don't quite understand what the value of this is, but if you don't know it now, you'll know it later. This is going to save your life. This is going to change your life. So I go ahead and leave. She lasted a week and she walked away. There is a happy ending to this story because months later, she went to Oregon to be with her mother. She got sober. She went to outpatient treatment sponsored by the state of Oregon. And today she leads a very productive life.
Yes, this is such a wonderful book. We want to give away a copy. So just write to the Writers Hangout podcast at gmail.com. Your favorite movie. Just send us. You can just send the title. You can send a little note along with it. Say hi to Walter and I. And the first one who sends an email will get a copy from Walter. And Walter, will you sign it to the person who gets?
No problem. I'd be, are you kidding? That's a privilege. Also, if somebody wants to get a hold of me, the best way is by email. And that would be Walter at the right rehab.com. Walter at the right rehab.com. therightRehab.com. And if you go to the website, therightRehab.com, you will also find on one of the pages a way to get a hold of me as well through a form. You could also call me at 310 200 That's 310 200 7530. That's how you get a hold of me if anybody wants to talk.
That just is so amazing that you just gave out your cell phone number. Not that you're proving anything, but it just proves what an amazing human being you are. I'm
Oh,
just thankful for
Sandy.
that. Thank you.
I'm not sure I deserve all the credit that you're giving me, but it's better than smoke signals.
We've been discussing some really heavy subjects, and now we're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about the movie 28 Days, and we're going to see it through the lens of Walter Wolff. You're going to talk about what's real, what's not, what's fun. 28 Days is
Sandra
not
Bullock
the
movie.
zombie movie. This is the
No.
Sandra Bullock movie,
Yeah,
directed
yeah.
by Betty Thomas and written by Susanna Grant.
I have to give the movie credit. First of all, you have to realize the movie was made 25 years ago. You
Yes,
know?
it came out in 2000.
Yeah. I mean, well, not quite 25 years, but for being able to make it known, hey, this is an option. This does exist.
And the lead is Sandra Bullock. I just love Sandra Bullock.
Isn't she wonderful?
Sandra plays Gwen, and she lives in New York City with her boyfriend Jasper, played by Dominic West. And at the very beginning, they're hitting the clubs in New York and they're drinking a lot. They get home, they try to have sex, but they just fall asleep.
And they
Then
start a fire.
they start a fire, and Jasper douses it with champagne. We don't know if this is Tuesday night, Friday night. This is just a crazy couple that we're introduced to. And then in the morning light, Gwen remembers that it's her sister Lily's wedding day. And Lily's played by Elizabeth Perkins. Jasper and Gwen have to rush to the wedding. So they're on the train car. And Walter, what do people who like to drink do once they hit the train?
Well, they drink. And
Yes,
and one of the things that bothers me about the movie is that they obviously are people of means, and they're way too young to have made it on their own.
right.
And so, I mean, they sure have a lot of money.
Well,
You know,
I'm going to assume because Jasper is English that he has royalty in his background. So he's got money. They don't really say what she does. They do mention she's a writer, but
Mhm.
I only saw when I was researching the movie that she's a journalist.
Yeah, I saw that too. But
Yeah.
you saw actually no aspect of like real life.
No, they live in a cool part of New York, wherever that is. It looked like the meatpacking district to me. I'm not sure. Or the old 25 years ago meatpack. Have you seen the meatpacking district lately?
No, I have not.
Oh,
No, I haven't been to New
it's
York in decades.
so they ride in the bar car, so they drink more. They get to the wedding. They're very loud and noisy. Gwen knocks over the wedding cake. And did you think that that might be the big thing that got her in trouble?
No, certainly with her family. But it's when she ran the limousine into somebody's house.
She just goes right into the house. So she's given a choice, like you mentioned, go to prison or go to rehab. So she chooses rehab. And she goes to Serenity Glen, and it was just God's country to me. Where do you think?
Oh, I just assumed it was outside of New York because the
Outside of New York.
boyfriend shows up a few times. It did look Eastern to me, like Adirondacks or so forth.
So she gets there. We mostly see the main area, and then there's a lot of woods. What would you think in 2003, how much that rehab cost and how much it would cost today in today's dollars?
In today's dollars, a place like
Mhm.
that, I mean, a minimum of probably 30 grand a month.
It looks like a camp.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, but also you're talking about a place where obviously ball players go and Hollywood people go. So it's probably a lot more than that. There's a facility in Malibu, which is very well known, and NBA players go there. It's $69,000. There's a place in LA which is 150 a month. I've sent clients to this place in Florida. It's $91,000 for the first 30 days. But for the second 30 days, they give you a break. It's $81,000 a month. Now, from where all this money comes, Sandy, I haven't a clue. I don't
And
know.
and this movie does not address that in any way,
No,
shape, or form.
no, it does not. It gives the impression that anybody can go there. I'm sorry, life's not like that.
Speaking of anybody can go there, Gwen meets the other main characters in the movie. There's Oliver, hypersexual, cocaine addict, Daniel, who the first time I saw the movie, I didn't have a lot of sympathy for him. But when I watched it in preparing for this, my heart really went out for Daniel. I don't know why I missed it. And he's a former doctor.
I know doctors. I've had doctors as clients, and
Okay.
actually, the most successful rate of maintaining recovery are physicians. And the reason for that is the local board, okay, they are really on top of that individual. They will stay on top of that individual with testing and continuing education for at least 5 years.
Wow, that's
And
really good.
yeah, and doctors need to go to programs that are specifically for doctors. There are programs specifically for executives. There are programs specifically for first responders. It's gotten very specialized.
Some of the other patients, there's Rashonda, she's a mother of two. Bobby Jean, the older woman, Reinhardt, who I think is Dutch. And then she's assigned a roommate, Andrea, the heroin addict. And Andrea is obsessed with a soap opera called Santa Cruz. What would you say Gwen's attitude is when she gets there?
I think all of them actually were a little over the top. Gwen's attitude was, yeah, you always have people who go to rehab, not because they want to, but because they have to. And a lot of times they're very cocky about them. They don't want to be there. But I have discovered in my experience that most people, after spending 2 weeks there, they say, you know what? I need to be here.
Yes, families out there, when the loved one's getting dropped off, they're not going to give you a big hug. They're going to probably give you the middle finger.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yes.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Gwen, she starts to have flashbacks and they're in black and white. And we see her as a child. How would you describe her mom?
You just hit the major flaw that would not happen today at responsible places because they would always do an assessment because when before anybody goes to a facility, there has to be what they call an over the phone assessment. And the reason for it is to make sure that the facility is the right facility for that individual and vice versa. If she were being truthful, and also it's very important that when the individual is doing an over the phone assessment, that individual be alone because that individual has to reveal things that she doesn't or he necessarily doesn't want his or her family members or somebody else to know because
Okay.
typically they're not always telling them the truth about what they're doing. But that would have come out about her childhood, about the trauma involved. And immediately they would have said, oh, okay, primary mental health, secondary substance, and trauma, because there are facilities that focus on females and PTSD. And that's today, that's what would have happened. She would not have gone to a place like that. Sandy, I've had facilities do an over the phone assessment with a client
Mm-hmm.
and they'll say to me, you know what, she's not really right for us, but let me call so and so because they would be right for her. Now, how many times would a competitor be willing to do that? The movie business, I have found, is really run on schadenfreude, whereas this business, the rehab business, the good ones are really run on goodwill.
I'm so glad to hear that. Her mom's kind of always wants to have fun. She's always telling the girls,
She's a drunk
she's a drunk.
and a
Yes.
very irresponsible mother. She never should
Yes.
have those kids never should have been in that environment.
And Jeremiah was a bulldog is always playing in the background in these flashbacks by Three Dog
Huh.
Night.
Yeah.
Now, Gwen still doesn't believe she has a problem. And she's out walking in the woods and she meets Steve Buscemi. Buscemi? How do we pronounce that?
Fushimi, I think it is.
Buscemi,
Yeah.
yeah. Walking in the woods. And she tries to shake him down on how to get drugs into Serenity Glen.
Mhm.
But But we find out that Steve, and his character's name is Cornell, is actually Gwen's counselor.
Hmm.
Surprise.
Hmm. Hmm. He was completely real. I totally believed him. He knew his role. That role was written well.
Yes, it was. Now,
Yeah.
here we go into, we're really starting to open up a can of worms here. On visiting day, Jasper shows up and slips Gwen a bottle of painkillers, and they sneak off the property.
At responsible places, highly unlikely. No, that wasn't real. It was for dramatic effect.
Gwen comes back to the facility later that night, and she is so high, and it's really obvious. So Cornell, who he's also a recovering addict, wants to kick Gwen out to serve her jail sentence. And she's still denying she has a problem, and she storms back to her room. Now, is that the procedure if you use in a rehab that you are automatically kicked out?
Well, a lot of places will say that's what's going to happen, but in reality, these usually are willing to give the individual a second chance. That's been my experience with clients, but they will not send her back to her room. What they do is they send her to detox.
So this is the part of the movie where she detoxing and she wants those pills. So she goes back to her room and she tosses the bottle of pills out of her third story window. And then she starts suffering from withdrawal symptoms and she's all alone. Now, Andrea comes in at some point and she's, "Are you going to come to the meeting?" She grabs her book and Gwen says, I don't even know if Gwen responds. Would you be allowed to miss a meeting like that? Could you just stay in your room?
People do it, but most places they will only give the individual just a few opportunities to do it. And it's like, you know what, you don't belong here. Or they convince the person, like, hey, you better get on the program. And they have some kind of leverage over the individual. But it does happen.
So Gwen climbs out the window, climbs on a tree because she can't sneak out. There's somebody at the door watching the door, and she falls and sprains her ankle and she's unconscious. And Mortensen, Eddie is the character's name. He is checking in. He sees her and he picks her up and he brings her into the facility. And one of the
Mhm.
best lines of dialogue, this is my favorite lines of dialogue. The person behind the counter goes, "You can't bring a girl into rehab."
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. Obviously, that scene is for dramatic effect, right? But in reality, people would normally flush them down the toilet. But hey, it worked. We got to meet him, and it makes the movie move along.
So now it's the next day, and Gwen goes to Cornell, her counselor, and pleads not to be picked out of rehab. I thought they hung such a lantern on the fact that you couldn't stay if you got caught, that felt weird to me. But he just basically says she can stay.
But some places are like that. That some places have rules, like you screw up, you're out of here. But most places, in my experience, when I send people, if that's ever happened, they will give the individual a second chance.
So she starts to participate in the recovery process. And one of the therapeutic training is to lift the leg of a horse. And she can't do it. Is this real?
Yes, it is. And equine therapy is very important. And one of the reasons is that horses are very social mammals, and so are we. And one of the points of it is that when you have an individual who most likely is having a very difficult time communicating with other human beings, the point is that if that individual can have a communication and basically get along with a horse, it helps that individual then be able to transfer that to other human beings. I got to give the movie credit for saying exactly why they're doing it. That was good. That was
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah, I like that. And, it's a movie, so we have to, put Gwen and Eddie together. So there's going to possibly be a romance. There's push and pull. Now, Gwen is still having those flashbacks about her thrill-seeking mother. They show this scene where the little girls wake up and mom's on the couch and she's passed out. And Gwen just slaps her to wake her up. And it's just like, oh, she's up. Let's go to school. So now this heartbreaking scene, they say your mother's died. Yeah. But
Yeah.
it's something like the little Gwen is like, oh, just slap her. She'll come back. It was just
Yeah.
so sad. So
Yeah.
now Gwen's 6 and Lily is not that much older, and their aunt didn't seem like a warm person at all to me.
No, yeah.
You just know these little kids are going to be
Yeah.
neglected.
They're in the way.
Yeah. Jasper shows up again and he proposes to Gwen with champagne, and they're on the lake. How much do you hate Jasper in this moment?
Tremendously. You really do. But it serves a purpose. And the purpose is to show, what that individual, if that individual wants to get sober, what that individual is facing.
Gwen goes back to her room and she finds Andrea in the bathroom cutting herself.
Right.
And oof, man, that cut looked bad. Gwen doesn't know what to do. And Andrea knows exactly how to manipulate Gwen. And
Yeah, that's true.
yes. And she convinces Gwen not to call anybody in for help and that everything's going to be okay. And she's going to get past this. They do bond during this scene, which is nice.
Yes, that is true. That is
Yeah.
true. And it does happen. People do, especially women, females, they do cut themselves. But usually it's ones who are younger.
Gwen calls her sister Lily to join group therapy. Although Lily's not thrilled, she shows up and attends the session and gives a speech about how horrible Gwen is. And she leaves in disgust when Gwen dismisses her own sister's feelings, who drove all the way to help her. Again,
Who could blame her? Who could blame her for being pissed?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Now, Andrea's soon going to be released. And so Gwen writes a farewell skit for her for Santa Cruz for the group to perform instead of a song. Because when you leave, they sing you a song. And it's the worst script that a writer has ever written of a movie I just don't know what they were thinking there. Okay. Later, again in the woods, we've got Gwen and Eddie talking, and Jasper shows up. And of course, he thinks there's something going on between them. And he mouths off, and Eddie punches him and again strains the relationship a bit more. Then, oh my goodness, just buckle up, guys. Gwen finds Andrea dead in the bathroom from an overdose of heroin.
Uh-huh.
She received a stuffed monkey in the mail, and that had the heroin. Now, as horrible as this is, it pushes Gwen to repair her relationship with her sister. And her sister is really her only person left in life. And I thought this was so powerful. Gwen calls Lily, but she just sobs into the phone. And Lily shows up.
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
And that's, 28 days have gone by and Gwen has to go back to the city. Jasper offers to make amends. Hey, he's going to get sober too. They have a quiet dinner and they're interrupted by old friends who want them to party. And of course, Jasper's like, hey, just one soda water. That's it. That's it. She just walks out of there and she sees a horse. She steps to it. She asks for help. And she lifts his leg. She later meets Reinhardt in a floral shop and they share a moment. And that's the end of the movie.
One thing I'd like to go rewind for a moment. The scene where she catches Vigo having sex with a female resident. Fully respect the movie for bringing attention to rehab. I mean, you have to really respect the movie for that. You really do. Today, to show you the difference, today, that guy would not be in that rehab because his issue, it could be the sexual addiction is either being driven by substance use or the other way around. He would be in a facility that specializes in sexual addictions.
Right. They took such creative license.
Sure, they did.
They needed a sex addict, so they just plugged it in.
Don't fault them at all. I got to tell you, it was really, I have to applaud them for doing it.
I cannot thank you enough for all the time that you have given us here on the Writers Hangout. And I cannot recommend this book enough.
Sandy, I really appreciate this opportunity to do this. Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Your positive feedback will help us keep the show going so we can continue bringing you more future episodes. Remember, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards, with executive producer Kristin Overn, producers Sandy Adomaitis, and myself, Terry Sampson. And our music is composed by Ethan Stoller.